Michael Wargo, team pilot for Precision Aerobatics, and this is my Addiction XL. This is just finished being built, and this video is going to give you an idea of how I set my plane up for the first flight. And then of course there's another video going to follow on how I dial it in to fly the way I want the plane to fly, and in my opinion will fly perfectly when I'm done. But for right now, I'm going to go over some of the basic settings and how to program the radio, and show you what I did with the linkages and so on to make sure that you understand what has to be done to make sure this plane is as good as it can be for your first flight. Okay, first and very important is, can you see the servo? That servo arm is exactly perpendicular as I set it up. And the servo arm is exactly the right length. If it's too long, it will deflect the surface past its travel potential, and eventually you'll have to maybe only have the travel adjust at 80 or 90%, and you'll already be at 100% deflection. And that's a problem because you're losing a lot of torque and a lot of resolution because the servo is just moving the surface too far. If it's too short, it will not allow you to deflect it fully. So you need exactly the right length servo arm. The way to do this is to deflect the thing manually as much as you possibly can, and then match it up with the hole on the servo arm to see which one is situated in exactly the right spot to give you that maximum deflection. The correct way to test this is to deflect the servo to its max. Now that's as far as it wants to go to one side. And before attaching that servo arm, make sure that the surface is deflected all the way, and then just try to match, in this case, a ball link up with the proper hole. That was the aileron, and of course the elevator is exactly the same. The first thing I need to do is make sure that all of the surfaces are exactly straight and require no sub-trim. The trick is, when I built this plane, I made sure when I set the push rods, I set them at exactly level. So in this case, it did not require any sub-trim to set the surfaces straight. And I also checked the direction to make sure they're going in the right direction. I know that's obvious, but the next stage is I've got to set the travel adjusts. And the travel adjusts are probably the most important setting and the biggest mistake that pilots in my clinics and everything come to me with bad flying airplanes. This is the #1 problem with their setup. All right, I'm going to get into the servo setup, and while on high rates, I am going to go in this case to the elevator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fully deflect it, and then I am going to change this setting up until I get full throw. And there's where it's stopping. A couple clicks back. There you go. So what I did was I deflected it full and then backed off a couple of clicks. In this case, it maxed out at 148, which is right near the max that I can adjust the travel. If it didn't get all the way to the top, I would have to change servo arm positions to a longer position to move it to an outer hole. But in this case, it's right on the money. I'm getting full deflection, so I'm going to leave it there. Now I'm going to take and push it full down and see what I can get out of full down. Okay, this one's maxing out at there you go, 137. The big mistake I see people make is their travels are 100 or 150, 150. And in that case, I know the model is not set up properly because it's physically impossible for both up and down for it to be at the same setting. The deal is with the travel adjusts, and it's really, really simple. Travel adjusts is not the same as rates. We're going to set up the rates later. What the travel adjusts do is it establishes the physical limitations of the servo. So even if you want to fly at very low rates, you still have to set the travel to max so the radio understands what, if you want to fly at 20% on low rates, it has to be established what 100% is. And right now, 148 and 137 is the official 100%. So when I go into my dual rates over here, and I set it up to elevator, there's my 100%. And when I deflect it 100%, as you can see, that's what I'm getting. Now on my lower rates, I only have that set at 42%. This is actually from a previous model. We're going to overwrite this. But that elevator will only go up that far, which is 42%. But it's 42% of full. This is such a commonly misunderstood item that I feel like it's important for me to clearly explain it. Now what I'm going to do with the model is I'm going to do that same exercise on every other surface. Now I'm going to set the right aileron up. And I've pretty much reached its physical limits right there at 142. I'm going to go down. I'm going to adjust it as far as it will go. And then I'm going to back off until I see it start to move backwards, which is right there. So I'm at 134 and 142 respectively. And now I'm going to set the left aileron and the rudder in exactly the same way. Now for my dual rates, with full 3D rates, I start with 100% and 70% and then back off the expo from there. It's always, for me, a little better too much than not enough. So elevator I have at 70%. Rudder, 70%. And ailerons I have at 65%. That's how I start every single time. Now, I use 3 rates and sometimes 4 rates. In this case, I generally set up a snap or precision rate on my second rate with the using the flight mode switch. Now, my second rate that I use is going to be what I call a snap rate. That is a rate that I use to fly precision, but I still have very fast ailerons because at the point where I want to do a snap roll or a quick snap maneuver, which is very common on straight line maneuvers, I want to make sure I have the option of the ailerons moving quickly. However, though I only have 75% on the ailerons, on most planes it's 100. These are just really strong and really large. But I still have 46% expo in it to make sure that it's nice and soft around the middle and I can still do all the nice smooth maneuvers. On this rate, my elevator, I always start with it around 40 to 45% because I don't want to accidentally set it too low. But I believe 42 to 45% is going to be a bit too much for a low precision rate. And I also have 34% expo, and I know I'm going to dial that back. But that's the way I start. On the rudder, on my snap rate, I use a little more rudder sometimes than others. I usually start around 50%, 45%. In this case, I have it at 47% with 33% expo. That's just the way I start. Again, this is all going to change once I get going. Normally, I program a low rate. In this case, I'm going to program a low, slow 3D rate. Instead of the high rate, which is 100% on the rudder and elevator and things like that, I'm going to set the rudder fairly high. I am going to set the aileron fairly high and the elevator fairly high. But you notice they're not all at 100%. The reason is this plane has so much control in each surface. They're so big that if I dial them back a little bit, it tends to make the rolling harriers and maneuvers like that a little smoother and the plane doesn't want to rotate so fast. So again, I'm going to dial this in, but these are the rates that I'm going to start with. You can easily do all the rolling Harrier maneuvers and everything you want to do on full rates. But for the most part, with this plane, once I get down low, I like to tone down some of the surfaces just a little bit. This plane tumbles very well just the way it is, and I use full rates for that. But I put a mix in this aircraft, which is an elevator flap mix. And what that does is when I deflect this switch, watch the ailerons and the elevator together, they move together. And what that's going to do is it's going to decrease the wing area, and it's going to make elevators really cool. The plane comes down very fast. And also any tumbling maneuvers, knife edge spins and things like that. It just makes them really, really good. In this case, as you can see, I have up and down 70%. And that, of course, I have it on switch F, but you can put it on any switch. But to me, that particular mix works really well with a lot of maneuvers, and I just turn it on and off with this switch when I need it. 70% is all you need. If you use 100%, I think sometimes it's a little too much of a good thing. And now this is something I've really been waiting to do, and I wanted to do while I was on film. Ta-da! Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Is that cool or what? Oh, the canopy's not on. It looked a little different. Wow. How cool.